myself again.
Hi and welcome to Steve Wraith's True Crime Podcast. And as you know, I tend to mix it up and have different people on the podcast every now and then. Not necessarily true crime, not necessarily real crime, somebody with an interesting life story. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by somebody I've had the pleasure of working with, Andy McNab. How are you, Andy?
Very well, very well.
Great to have you on, mate. Absolutely fantastic to have you on. Thanks for sparing the time. I know that you're busy. We're going to cover a whole wide range of topics today, but want to go right back to the start. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born, Andy?
Well, I presume I was born in London because I think they call them foundlings now. Basically, I was abandoned in South London outside an A&E department in Guy's Hospital near London Bridge. As a child, so and then grew up basically in South London. I was in care until I was 5. Then I got adopted, but then just stayed in South London really, and landed up in Peckham.
Okay, so I mean, you grew up in London. What were you like at school, Andy?
Terrible. I just didn't like it. I didn't like the smell because it was like, I don't know, floor polish and boiled cabbage as far as I was concerned. And I didn't like it. And the problem was I was too cocky because I thought I didn't need to go to school. So really from the age of 9, well, primary school, 9, 10, I weren't really interested in school. I just hated it.
Were you into sport, fitness?
Not until really I was about 14 or 15, maybe. Yeah, you know, that sort of adolescence, thinking, right, you've got to get in, because then if you're fit or you're doing, you know, a sport or whatever, then you're a better chance of getting the girls. So it was only, and because there was a couple of mates who got into karate, so it was that era of all the sort of, you know, the Chinese kung fu movies, Bruce Lee, all that stuff. So everybody, all us kids were running around headbutting lampposts and all thinking we're Bruce Lee. So that's when it really started for me.
So did you actually leave school with any qualifications?
No, nothing. I left school too early. When I got into a secondary school, I got a job as a 15-year-old during the summer of delivering drinks mixers off of vans, out of trucks, you know. So we went to a yard, fill up with all these drink mixers, and then go around delivering to pubs. So I got that job during the summer, and then thought, well, what's the point of going back to school? I didn't really bother because I thought, well, I was literally getting £8 a day. I thought that's fantastic. We lived on the council. We lived in a council flat. So I thought, well, I'll get a council flat at some time. So what do I need to go back to school? And clearly got all that wrong.
Obviously, you know, you were a foundling, as you mentioned at the start. Where did you end up living? Did you have adopted parents?
Yeah. Basically, my mum was a cleaner in the home we were at. We lived in a big sort of old Victorian, you know, 3-story house, which was a council home, and it wouldn't happen now. She used to take kids home at weekends. They go, all right, I'll take that one home for the weekend. And I was 5, and there was another kid who became my brother, who was older than me. He was about 11 or 12 at the time. And all of a sudden, we were going there quite a lot of weekends. And I didn't realise I was getting adopted. I thought I was just, you know, they said, oh, well, you're going to come and live with us now. And I thought, yeah, okay. Because the older lad was there as well, exactly the same. They'd done to him, they adopted him. I thought it was actually normal. I thought that's what happened. So literally it was weekends, and, you know, it was all right. I thought I quite liked the home as well. The home was quite good. So, and then it changed. They said, oh, well, you're living with us now. I go, well, yeah, all right. And that was it. It just sort of just happened.
I've got to ask you, because we do a lot of football on this channel. Newcastle United being my team, as I've told you before. Did you end up following a football team as a youngster?
Well, yeah. Sad but true, but Millwall. So, and then on Wednesday nights, all very exciting on a Wednesday night if there's a home game. So there used to be a power pylon outside the well, it's gone now, but it used to be an old pylon outside the grounds. And what you could do, you could climb it and then jump over the wall and get in there for nothing. And on the stands, freezing cold Wednesday nights, and then all very exciting. That cup of Bovril and a steak and kidney pie, all good. Yeah, all bad. It was freezing, but that was it. Yeah,
it wasn't cool Blue Lane for nothing, mate. That's for certain.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Probably one of the most terrifying away grounds I'd ever been to as a 17 and 18-year-old was Millwall, and just
it's absolutely mad.
Doing that walk machine with the women and women with the kids in the prams chucking stuff at you, Andy, and that.
Yeah. And it really happened from the tube station onwards, from the station at Newcastle. All kids getting thrown in, onto the lines, all that sort of stuff. It was all out of control.
Now, it wasn't until I started looking into your past I didn't realise that you'd done a little bit of naughty boy stuff when you were younger, before you got into your military career. Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah,
well, that was the problem. Basically, I got this job delivering these drinks mixers and all that sort of stuff. And actually, I just wanted more money. And what I didn't realise was that, you need an education, get a better job, and you'll get more money. So we just used to nick it, basically, and nick anything. And that was the problem. We all got caught. What we used to do is of a, like, I don't know, it all depended. It was sometimes about 8 or 9 or sometimes even more kids. What we do, we mob a little block of private flats. These ones in particular was in near Crystal Palace, which in our heads was where all the rich people lived. So we would just break windows, all smash in during the day when everyone's at work, earning money to pay for them. And then myself and 2 other lads, the great criminals we went back again the next day thinking, that'd be all right. There'd be a bit of hardboard up covering the windows, and we'll get in again, just 3 of us. But the police were there. We got away from the flat. We started running, and I was running up a hill towards a train station called Sydenham Mill, and it was an old Victoria station with a bridge going over the lines into an housing estate. And I thought, well, as soon as I get into that housing estate, I'm laughing because I know where I'm going and I can't run. So I was getting chased by a really overweight policeman. And what I'd done, because I was too cocky, I stopped and started making fun of him, and then turned and ran. And as I went over the bridge, just out of frustration, he just threw his truncheon. I used to have those little short truncheons at the time. He threw it. It hit me on the back of the head. And I went down the stairs the other side, and I thought, well, that was great because I'm out by the housing estate and I can get in. But the police know what they're doing. So there was a guy there with a police dog, and obviously he's shouting at me to stand still. Otherwise, they're going to let the dog go. And what I'd done, I put my hand into the rubbish bin by the entrance of the train station, something to throw at the dog and run, and it was a crisp wrapper. And I threw a crisp wrapper at the dog. I know. That's exactly what the police guy, the old policeman with the dog handler, he started laughing as well, And by that time, the other policeman had come down, caught. And at that time, there was this whole thing about juvenile delinquents. So the government of the day were doing this thing called a short, sharp shock within the Borstal system. And so I got sent to Borstal. And the idea of Borstal at that stage is, thankfully, the system's all gone now because it didn't work. There's no education, rehabilitation. What it was all about was, in theory, scaring you so much that you wouldn't reoffend, which didn't work. And thankfully, in the 80s, the Borstal system was closed down because it just didn't work.
Can you remember your first day in there? What it was like? Were you scared? Were you nervous? Were you still as cocky as you were at school?
Yeah. No, I was nervous, and that was the problem. You get in there, everybody's trying to be too cocky, and overcompensate for it. And then very, very quickly within that day, you all went to one block. Everybody, the sentence intake, or when there was 47 of us, we all went into one block, and you stay there for 2 weeks. And what they're sorting you out, working out what you're going to be doing. And obviously there were some kids there that would be drug takers. So there would be, they'd have to sort them out, all that sort of stuff going on. And it was in that first day, for me, the short, sharp shot worked. I think I don't want to do this again. And then I just decided to just shut up and just see what was going on. So then after like the first month, you go back into different wings and everybody's segregated. And you all have you seen the film Scum?
Yeah, I mean, my pal Ray Burtis was in that.
System. You go into and then all of a sudden, all that stuff. So you know the kids who have been there for a while, who are running that block. You know all what's going on. So just shut up and wait for them to approach you, really. And yeah, as I say, for that first bit, that short, sharp shock thing really, really worked. Absolutely.
How long were you in there for?
I was in for 12, 13, 15 weeks before the military came in to recruit for soldiers. What was happening, because there was no rehabilitation. Again, it was all this, scaring kids. So there was a lot of groups that were lobbying the government. A lot of charities going, well, this system's wrong, it won't work. And actually, Scum was instrumental, or one of the instruments that stopped the Borstal system, just showing, sort of what went on. And eventually, the government then started getting groups coming in, trying to get a bit of social mobility for people, for 16, 17-year-olds who are in this system. And one of them was the army. And we all listened to this recruiting, it was a major, the recruit guy go, well, these are, lots of opportunities in the military. You would join as a junior soldier. And the incentive was, if you got accepted into the army, you didn't go back to Borstal, you went home, because your parents had to sign the release form because you were still minors, technically minors, 16, 17-year-olds. And then you would wait for your reporting date to go to the whatever unit you was going to. So for me, that was a great incentive. So we all thought we were going to be helicopter pilots because we saw this brilliant film. It was a helicopter pilot flying a little two-seater in, sort of khaki shorts and a T-shirt. And he was flying over the beaches in Cyprus. Nobody knew where Cyprus was, but it looked brilliant because, sun was out, the beaches, he's waving at the girls are waving at him, all that stuff going on. And they went, right, who wants to be a helicopter pilot in the army? And obviously we all put our hands up. And we went to Sutton Coldfield, which is just outside of Birmingham, for 3 days for assessments, physical assessments, academic assessments. And very, very clear, none of us were going to be helicopter pilots. We wouldn't be able to get close enough to spit at it, let alone like fly it. And I got an offer to join the infantry. So I joined a regiment called Green Jackets, which was a light infantry regiment. And again, because of like the not liking it in Borstal, I thought, right, I'll do that. It sounded like a football team, quite frankly. I didn't really listen what was going on in Sutton Coldfield, because I just wanted to, I'll join the army. I'll do 3 years in the army, and that was it. So I said, yeah, okay. So then, went through the system, went home, and waited for the reporting date.
What was the basic training like back in those days?
Do you know, it was, at first, it was, it was a bit of a shock because it was worse than the Borstal. So I landed up in what was called an infantry junior leaders battalion. So this battalion, instead of training for 6 months, if you're going into what I call phase 1, phase 2 training, like basic training, is normally about 6 months, something like a bit longer than 6 months, say 7 months. If you're joining a junior leaders battalion, it's a year. And the idea is they're going to teach you how to be an infantry soldier, but at the same time, they've got to teach you how to be the future leadership, the corporals, the sergeants, the non-commissioned officers of the infantry, which I didn't really know because I weren't listening when I was in Sutton Coldfield. And so I turned up. I had an haircut, as it said, you get a bit of pay, what to do and all that. Turned up, they took another layoff. So we're all there with like number ones. And I had to shave every day. So from day one, you had to shave. I didn't have to shave properly till I was like 18, 19. So I'm covered in acne, cutting off the tops of these zits every morning. It's, you're up at 6 o'clock. You've got to get all the block jobs done. You've got to go what's called a Queen's Parade. So everybody's got to go to breakfast regardless. Because then if you faint, while you're working during the day, that's your fault because you haven't had breakfast, sort of thing. So you get charged. And then you have room inspections every day. You know, all that sort of stuff that people imagine goes on. And I thought, well, I don't particularly like this. And initially I thought, that's great. I'm only doing 3 years of this and then I'm out. But then I soon found out that actually what I'd done is signed on for 6 years. Because of this extra training they're giving you, they want more money out of their, they want more of you out of the money investment they're putting in for a year. So, I thought, right, I'm getting ripped off by the army now. But it was all the stuff, you look at all of the, if you like, the bullshit that goes on, was portrayed in films and all that. There is a lot of that goes on in the army, particularly in basic training, but there's a reason for it. So if you can't keep yourself and your gear in good order when you're in the camp, if you can't do it there, once you're out in the field, you'll just be a mess. You won't be able to look after yourself, look after your gear, and then you're absolutely useless. So there's the reasons why all these things happen is to always to get a soldier, once he's in the field, able to maintain himself, maintain his weapon, and help maintain everybody else. And that's what all this, bulling the boots and pressing your gear and all that sort of stuff that we see or read about. There's a reason for it. But I didn't get that for about the first 3 months. I just couldn't understand. And during the inspections, the locker inspections, all the stuff, you'd have show parades where 11 o'clock at night, you would have another inspection. I didn't understand the reasons why. But it took a while for me to sort of get it in my brain, the reason why all that stuff happened.
Was there anything you particularly struggled with?
No, do you know what? No, as a junior soldier, I actually started to really, really like it. And the reason I started to like it, and you get promoted whilst you're in the junior leaders battalion. You don't keep the rank, obviously, it's just there whilst you're doing training. So I become a junior sergeant. And the more I sort of enjoyed it, and the more, if you like, goodies I got because of it, the more I enjoyed it, and it sort of, got on. But that took about 3 or 4 months. What I found very, very hard, and at the same time sort of changed my life, was going back to school. So again, it was about 3 months where we all got marched off to the Army Education Centre, and up until that, I didn't even know they had an education sort of corps. What do I know? So off we go. I'm thinking, right, the army's ripping me off again. But what happened in there that very first day sort of changed. Well, not only my life, but all of us that were in the in that rifle company. Basically, the educator who came in was a captain. So he's 3 pips, and and to us he was the world's oldest soldier. But now I know he was 40. But it was, to us, he was ancient, he was 16, 17-year-olds. And he'd already served 22 years and become a regimental sergeant major in an infantry battalion, which is quite a big deal. Got a commission and went back to join the Army Education Corps. And the reason was that he was a junior leader once himself in exactly the same situation. And what he said to us, he said, look, everybody over the outside of here, on the other side of the wire, we're in a camp, so we got the fences and the barbed wire, all that sort of stuff. He said, they think the reason why you're in here is because you're thick as shit. And he says, you're not thick as shit. The only reason you lot can't read and write is because you don't read and write. And that's what we're going to start doing today. And it was then that because he told us all, that the reason why we weren't flying helicopters, that all of us had the numeracy literacy levels between a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old. Wow. And I think the 11-year, it's key stage 2, I think that's called now, sort of about 11-year-old. And for me, it all made sense because the Squaddies newspaper is the Sun. So you'd be there at a naffy break, which was about 10 o'clock, you pint of Vimto and a steak and kidney pie sort of thing. Reading the Sun newspaper, then there weren't, page 3, there weren't much to read. So you got that, turn it over to the sports page or whatever. And I really couldn't read it properly. There was words I could not understand. I used to make it up. So for me, the education was, if you like, hard because I didn't have one. But at the same time, not only me, it just changed our lives because then it started a process of doing something I should have done years ago.
Where was your first operational posting, Andy?
It was Northern Ireland. Literally on my 18th birthday, the battalion, when I joined, was stationed in Gibraltar. We came back from Gibraltar after a couple of months, and we were then stationed in a garrison town, is Tidworth, which is on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire. And the battalion, about 3 weeks beforehand, had left for Northern Ireland for what they called emergency tours, which were like no more than 5 months, 4 to 5 months maximum. You do these tours, and they were off already. I couldn't go because I wasn't 18, and because about 5-6 years before, there'd been so many 17-year-old soldiers killed in Northern Ireland. There was this stop. You had to be 18 to go. So there was about a 3-week gap. I then joined on my 18th birthday in South Armagh in a place called Crossmaglen, which then was it was called bandit country. There was no vehicles being used because of IEDs. The very same thing that had been sort of blowing up troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. We had the commanding officer was killed. The colonel in charge of the battalion. There was a helicopter shot down. There was all this sort of stuff going on. But as an 18-year-old, I found it quite sort of exciting. It's that great saying, you got to be careful what you want. But at the same time, you're thinking, well, this is what infantry soldiers do. So it's a mixture, really. Certainly the very first contacts, the firefights. You contact people like Provisional IRA, those sort of groups. Initially, I found quite confusing because I'm just way down on the food chain. But as you sort of got used to it, and we used to do one of those tours every year from Tidworth. So the whole sort of cycle was just sort of Northern Ireland, go and leave, getting ready really for the next tour.
It was the height of the Troubles then as well when you were over there. So I mean, it was live action. It wasn't like going across on a jolly.
Yeah, we do. You do 24-hour patrols in the town, which was right on the border. That's why it was so prolific there. You do 24-hour patrols in the town, and that was to stop vehicles coming in with mortars on, being used as mortar base plates to get more. We got mortared, not regularly, but we got mortared. We had some of the observation posts blown up, and then we'd do that for 4 days, and then you'd go out on the border for 4 days, and literally you'd be patrolling during the day and setting up ambushes on the border at night. And so it was a real mixture of that. What you think about what goes on or used to go on in Northern Ireland would be like, what you get pictures of soldiers in Belfast or Derry within the cities. There was a huge amount, in this South Armagh, this bandit country going on, doing more traditional infantry work, patrolling, called fighting patrols, where you're trying to dominate an area, and ambushes at night.
You were awarded the military medal out there. Was it a particular incident that took place with an IRA?
It was. It was on the second tour. We were back in South Armagh, in a place called Keady, which was a small town right on the border. It was about 2 minutes drive to the border, and so again we'd have 24-hour presence on the ground and within the town to stop the mortar base plates. And then we go out into the country to do those sort of patrols. And at that time, there were attacks on foot patrols where they'd be patrolling along a street, and a cattle truck would go past that had been all armoured up. And these cattle trucks would only have the tailgate 3/4 high, which most cattle trucks are like that anyway. So what would happen as they passed the patrol, then what they call an active service unit, the IRA, would come up and start firing as the wagon carried on, and then go straight over the border and into a town called Castle Blaney in the south. So we were doing double the amounts of patrols in Keady, the small sort of town on the border there, and we would have a patrol up in the north and a patrol in the south, in the hope that if they see one patrol, they'll attack it, and hopefully we can stop it at the other end of the town. So we'd come out of the countryside onto the edge of the town, and there was a housing estate opposite us. And as I come up onto the road, there was loads and loads of locals, and then they all started going mad, running and shouting. And at first it didn't worry me, because when I saw them, it was a Friday night, and what happened, coaches used to pick up the locals and take them into the south, because that was safer for a night out. And then the vehicles would bring them back, the coaches would bring them back. So at first I didn't worry about it too much. I saw them. Then they saw me coming around the corner with a patrol behind. They all started running. And then I looked to my left, there was a little row of shops. And there was, it was about 3 or 4 members of the Provisional IRA, with the balaclavas on and holding their weapons, their M16s, doing the big PR show to the crowd. And because what they were doing, they were getting into a cattle truck that had been armoured up with sandbags, and they were going to go to the other side of the town and drive past the other patrol that was at the other side of the town. So we just caught them as they were getting ready. And there was one of the lads turned, and we was about, I don't know, maybe 10, 15, no more than 15 meters, apart. So he's turned around, and it was just as much as a shock, him seeing me, as me seeing them. And initially it just turned into what we call a cabbie. You see all the action in films where it's all sort of, it works and it's all good. It's not like, in real life, it's not like that at all. Yeah. It's just chaos, because they're flapping. So they're just firing around. Some of them are firing, the ASU are firing, not even knowing what they're firing at, because they can't see what's going on, So all the civilians started to run around in chaos and run away. So initially it started as a cabbie. So the first magazine of the weapon was just a cabbie, much like those lads. And then got the next magazine on, and then it started to slow down a bit. And by then the driver was already in the cab. They'd started to drive away. There was a guy hanging on the tail who I'd shot. So he's sort of hanging, slumped over the tailgate. They're driving away, dragging him back. And then they drove and then got across the border as quickly as possible, as the other patrols was coming in. So by then there's people lying on the floor. There's all sorts going on. And then so you have to do what's called a follow-up and trying to work out if any of them have been left or they, they're all in the truck. So as I'm going along, there was a butcher shop that I passed, and there was loads of people in it, and quite rightly they were all down. But then loads of them started to move, and I thought there was one of the ASU. So I turned and I put a couple of rounds through the window, and thankfully there wasn't any of the ASU in there. But all the the butcher had done an amazing insurance job. He got a new shop front, and his car was all shot up. So he was all right. So we done the follow up. Then the dogs came in, and then there was a blood trail, and one of the lads who was shot who'd done a runner. So the dogs went to try and find him. They never got him. He landed up over the border again. So there was a guy called Peter McNab I'd killed, and 2 of the ASU were wounded, and they were being treated in the south in Castle Blaney. And it was quite interesting because the 10 o'clock news, obviously it was a big thing on the 10 o'clock. This was about 6 o'clock at night. So by 10 o'clock, the news was on. And so I'm watching the news, and it was really freaky seeing what had just gone on. And of course, half of it they got wrong. And years later, I met Kate Adey, who was the Northern Ireland reporter at that time. She was banging on the doors of the housing estate. And she said she went up to one of these doors, and there was loads of strike marks, loads of, like all the bricks have been hit by rounds during this contact. One of the windows was out. And she's knocked on the door to talk to the guy and ask him, what did you see and all that. And the guy said to her, he said, "Oh, I didn't see a thing." And she said, "Yeah, but what about all the shooting and all that?" Literally about 50 meters away. He said, "Oh, I had a John Wayne film on. I thought it was on the telly."
Brilliant stuff.
Chaos.
Fantastic. I mean, when did you decide to move from the Green Jackets to the Special Air Service, the SAS?
It was about 8 years. I was in the Green Jacks for 8 years, and then I'd become a platoon sergeant by then in a rifle company. And there's a term called pinnacle soldier, and what it is, which is a nightmare for the army, because it means that, you know, a soldier thinks, well, I've done all what I want to do, you know, and obviously they want to keep him in for the experience, and obviously they might be thinking about getting out, and it was really then. So I was a platoon sergeant, and I thought, well, you know what am I going to do? I'm going to carry on in the Green Jackets, which, you know, wouldn't be a bad thing. It was all right, but what else was there out there? And certainly during the first 2 tours that I'd done in Northern Ireland, there was a small group of regiment lads. Basically, Special Air Service within the military is simply called the regiment. There was regiment lads who would come in and come out, and, you know, you weren't allowed to talk to them, you know, all that sort of stuff. But actually, you would see them, you know, long hair, fast cars, and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, well, do you know what? Is it now the time to give selection a try? And I thought, well, why not? You know, it seemed like a natural progression. And then the year before, there was a lad out of another rifle company in the battalion who had got in, and none of us thought he would pass. So there was a little bit me thinking, well, you know what? If he can get in, maybe I've got a chance. So there's lots of sort of urban legends about how you go on selection. You know, I'm specially chosen and all that. It's nothing like that at all. Basically, you go to your unit's administration office and say you want to apply for selection, and you fill a form in. It's as simple as that. They send it then to Hereford, which is the base of the Special Air Service on the Welsh border, and they send you a date back for selection. And it's really as simple as that. And then it's all up to the battalion whether they let you go on selection, because you can't go on selection within 6 months of an operational tour. You know, there's lots of different caveats on that. But it was simple as that. And I thought, right, well, better get my finger out my arse now and start preparing for selection.
What kind of stuff were you doing at the start? I mean, were you doing covert and overt operations? What was the first kind of jobs you did?
Well, the very first thing, I got badged after the selection process, like about 7 months, the selection process. So you get what's called badge, you know, become member of the Special Air Service, all that sort of stuff. And my squadron, B Squadron, were already in Southeast Asia on an operation in the rainforest. And so literally, I turned up as the new boy. And then when you go into the rainforest, when you go into the jungle, it's like all the smells change and all that. So literally, you could smell all the daz, you know, in the gear, you know, all the fresh gear, new jungle boots. You know, the new boy turns up. So then I've done the last 6-7 weeks with them on that job. So the first job was back in the jungle, which people think is very sort of inhospitable. It's not. It's probably the best environment because you've got heat, and you've got food, you've got shelter. You know, it's great. I like it more than anything else. But so I came back from that, and then my troop, which was the Air Assault Troop in B Squadron, we were going to go over to Northern Ireland to become the Special Air Service, the regimental sort of group in Northern Ireland. So it was interesting because it was really early in the career. I went back over to Northern Ireland in what's called the troop, and become one of these lads who I used to see when I was in the battalion, you know, running around in all the fast cars. And I had this big permed haircut. I looked like Michael Jackson, I don't know, 1979, like, you know, which was all the craze, you know, permed hair and, you know, big droopy moustaches, all that sort of stuff. And so I went back and done a troop tour, which was amazing because it was seeing, if you like, the grey area of the conflict, because, you know, obviously politically it was called the Troubles, but you know, everybody knows it was a war. Absolutely, you know, it's a war. More soldiers died year on year in Northern Ireland than they did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah.
Was there any jobs you hated doing?
Yeah, I particularly disliked OPs, the observation boat, you know, where you dig in and you'd be sitting there for days on end. So some of the jobs, because they're really boring. So because your biggest weapon is concealment, so you've got to dig it. Whatever you're looking at a farm complex, or you're waiting for one car, you're checking every registrator, and you might be there for about a week, 10 days, just there, just looking at number plates as they zoom past you, sort of thing, just waiting for a car. And then, because the good job would be the people who are waiting to react to that car coming past, so it was all on a roster, the OPs, so you knew the next OP that come up, you're on it, and it could be 2 days or it could be 2 weeks. So that was it, because you're sitting there. Once you're wet, that's it. You're not moving, that's it. So yeah, it'd be better to be on the reaction side of the OP jobs, but it's all part and parcel of it.
Did you ever get called in to do VIP protection jobs? And if you did you look after any big names that you could mention?
When the security service guys, the MI5 guys, they would come over to be doing meeting informers, source meets, high level source information, all that sort of stuff. So those guys, when they came over, we would look after them. But it wasn't in the way that you'd be overtly running around them, because they'd go and meet somebody. So what you would do, you'd get there, you'd clear the area, you'd stay in the area, you'd make sure that you got them there to do that, because you're not allowed to listen in, obviously, what was going on. So then you would, what was called trigger, you trigger the source or the sources, whoever they were coming into the building or whatever it was, the location. And then you would protect that, make sure no one else was coming in, to look after the security service guy. So there was actually quite a lot of that. Certainly towards the late 80s, when all the secret negotiations were going on, the peace negotiations, there was quite a lot of that going on.
Any big names that you can mention that you looked after?
No, can't, mate. Unfortunately.
Did you have to sign the Secrecy Act?
But all the lads, bizarrely, a lot of the lads you think would be part of the peace negotiations weren't, because there was a distinct groups. There were groups that wanted a negotiated settlement.
Yeah.
Because they, and then freely the leadership of Sinn Féin agreed that they'd lost the war. They wanted a negotiated settlement. There was another group of lads who didn't. They wanted the war to continue. And so internally within the different nationalist organisations, there was a lot of struggle going on. So the ones that span out from the peace negotiations, who are still the hardliners, are people like Real IRA, Continuity IRA, those sort of guys. So there's a lot of people that you think that would be suing for peace, but actually they weren't at all. They wanted the war to carry on.
Let's move on to the Gulf War. Again, you ended up writing a book about one particular event, which is still available, and I recommend anybody who's never read any book about this kind of life and story reads this. Bravo 20, fantastic book from start to finish. Tell us about the Gulf War and that particular experience.
Yeah, well, by then I was the when you join a regiment, you lose all your ranks. I was a sergeant in the infantry. You become a trooper, a private soldier, and then you go through the rank system within the regiment. So by then I was the troop sergeant of the air assault troop in B Squadron. And we were on the counter-terrorism team, and we thought, when the Kuwait was invaded, we thought we'll extend our tour, but actually the commanding officer at the time took us off the team early and replaced us with G Squadron, who were due to come in 3 or 4 months' time. So off we went to Saudi, and we were preparing to do all the things that special forces do on what we call these green options, where you got all the party gear on, you've got uniforms and sort of infantry style assault weapons, that sort of stuff. It's called green options, and which is a disruption of communications, supply lines. There's a thing called prime target assassination, which is IEDs, infrared explosive devices, try to channel the leadership of the Iraqis in to kill them. So we were all at our different jobs. We're all planning, preparing for these jobs. But then Scud missiles started to fire from the western deserts in Iraq into Israel. So the plan for the Iraqis, they wanted Israel to join the war. And if Israel had joined the war, the alliance we had with the Arab nations would have collapsed, because technically none of them are going to fight alongside Israel. So that was what they were trying to do. So Bush Senior, who was the president at the time, done a deal with the Israelis, was that the Israelis wouldn't do anything for 2 weeks. If Scuds still fell in, Tel Aviv and, in Jerusalem, after 2 weeks, Israel was going to do their own thing. At one stage, all of their offensive air force was airborne, orbiting around the Med, ready to do strikes. So this last minute deal was done. So all of our jobs changed. And I was given a job to take an 8-man foot patrol up to the northwest of Baghdad to try and look for a fiber optic cable that was sending information to the Scud teams. So these things take about 2 hours to set up and work, and there's a surveyor with them, so they can, aim them properly. So the idea is, if we can cut the lines of communication, Scud teams in the Western Desert will be able, they'll be just there twiddling their thumbs. And there were half squadron groups out there at the regiment who are trying to find them to destroy them. They'll destroy them themselves, or they'll call in fast jets, and just laser target them and get the fast jets in to destroy them. So off we went. We weren't too sure where it was. We weren't too sure what to do when we got it. Headbutt it or blow it up. We didn't know. But the whole concept of any special forces is to go with a limited amount of information, because otherwise it's pointless having special forces. You might as well send up lads, if you knew everything, send them up there. So off we went. We got there on the first night. We didn't find it. When we got there, we had to find what's called an LUP, a light point, because again, a bit like Northern Ireland, the biggest weapon is concealment. It's not the weapons we got; it's the concealment. So find a place to hide. Try to have a quick look to see if I could find this where we thought it would be running. Couldn't find it, but that didn't matter. We'll get out the next night and find it. Before you sort of go into the LUP, you do what's called a clearing patrol. So myself and 3 others from the 8-man patrol, they stayed at the LUP to protect that, so we know that's secure. I took an 8-man foot patrol out, and what we discovered was, first there was an Iraqi mechanized armor brigade coming from the border with Iran, because they've been fighting the war there for 10 years. They were going down south, getting ready for the Allied invasion of Kuwait, and protecting that part of the armored vehicles coming down were S-60 anti-aircraft guns, a couple of 100 meters away. So weren't too worried about them, because they're static and they're in their own country. It's not as if they'd be sending out clearing patrols. So we got into the LUP. Try to send the following morning. Try to send out what's called a SITREP, situation report. Basically, we use satellite technology. You bang out to the satellite an encrypted message, and all it does is says where you are, what you're doing, and what you're going to do. And that's it. And then that message wasn't getting received. It wasn't hitting the satellite and going down to what we call receivers. But there was no problems, because we had a plan how to deal with that. So we were there with the armoured vehicles going up and down the main supply route. And it was about 4:04. We started to hear some goats coming towards our LUP, which was a dip in the ground. It was we're called watershed. Over thousands of years, water's come in and made this sort of dip in the ground. And we could hear the goats come in, and then we could hear this young lad coming, and he was herding the goats. He was trying to move the goats along. So all of a sudden, the goats come to the edge of our LUP. They're looking down at us. We're looking at the goats. Then all of a sudden, this young lad was coming over with a stick, trying to move the goats along. He looked down at us, 8 weapons pointed at him, and quite rightly he ran. And he ran towards the guns. So we had to take that as a compromise. And because we were so closed up in the LUP, we become an easy target, so we had to spread out on the plane and hopefully make enough distance. So by the time it becomes last light, because in that part of the world, it's last light and first light quite regular. 6 in the morning, 6 at night, it's quite a regular thing. So we could use the cover of darkness to get onto what we do call our emergency RV, where we'd meet a helicopter. That was already pre-arranged because of this lost comms thing. That never happened because obviously the lad got to the guns. They'd stopped some of the armour brigade, and they've come down to have a look. So we had our first contact. We wouldn't be able to do head south. So what we had to do was put in what we call our escape and evasion plan, E&E plan, which normally is to go to the American or the British embassies of the nearest country of safety. And ironically, it was Syria. We were closer to Syria than we were Saudi. So we had to put in our E&E plan, which is already sort of, you know, part of the planning, and start heading to Syria. And then during that time, we were getting up to the border. We had loads of firefights around the border. It just went on and on. There was all sorts going on. People were running out of ammunition, and so at the end of that second night, because it took about 2 nights to get up there, 3 were dead, 4 were captured. 3 of them that I knew, and 1 that I discovered later on had been captured, and only 1 had actually got across the border and made it to, I think it was the British embassy. They got to the British embassy, and then later on he was ferried back to the our base that we got in Cyprus. And when you get to the embassies, you don't knock on the door because they won't let you in. So you have to almost like jump the fence, hug a tree, so you know you're not a threat. And you have these proof statements. You have statements. So each job you're given statements that you make, and you just keep on shouting that out until they hear it. And then obviously that shows who you are, and that filters down. So I got caught about an hour before last light because I got up to the border on that last night. And what I didn't want to do was cross the border because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know whether it was barbed wire, you know, a wall. I don't know. Syria welcomes careful drivers. I didn't know what it was. So I didn't want to get caught on the wire on first light because what I wanted to do is get into Syria and make distance, because it's a political border. It's not a social border. And there was a town called Al Qaim, but that straddles the border. So it's get across the border and make distance. So what I decided to do was then hold up in Iraq for the daylight hours. So I had about an hour until first light, and I found a drainage culvert. Thought I'll get into there, spend the day in there. So as soon as it's dark, I'll get out, and I've got all night to first of all negotiate the border, whatever it's going to be, and secondly to make as much distance as I can away from the border, and I can sort it all out. And I was feeling all right actually, because it was maybe an hour and a half till last light. There'd been lots of activity out in the field. You could hear kids shouting about. There was gunfire, sporadic gunfire here and there. I heard one of our own weapons going off because we use 5.56, and the signature to what they use is 7.62 short. So the rifles, the weapon signatures are different. So I heard a little burst, hundreds of meters away. So there was obviously somebody else out of the patrol who was still out there and who still had ammunition left. And then vehicles were crossing the culvert, but this time they stopped. Lads jumped out. They started firing all around the culvert. They wanted me to get out. I'm not getting out because, when you got lads getting excited, with weapons and all that, you might end up getting shot by accident rather than on purpose. Yeah. So eventually they pulled me out. And there's a thing in the military called tactical questioning, and basically it means you just get filled in. But they got a nice name for it. It's called TQ. Just got filled in basically. They're taking out the frustrations. We had bribe money with us. We all had gold sovereigns, which is a standard thing. You're always given money and gold, what you can use as bribes, which I was saving obviously for when I got into Syria. So that disappeared pretty sharpish. The gold was there. I had it taped on a belt around my waist. That had gone. But then they were just taking frustrations out because obviously they're getting they're getting killed. The air war had just started, so they're getting bombed every night. So it's a frustration thing. And then got taken to Al Qaim, to the base there, where I met another member of the patrol he was the guy who fired the rounds, trying to draw attention because there was another guy who died, Steve Lane, who was dying with hypothermia. Because again, it's, you know, we always think the Middle East as being hot. It's not, you know, certainly that high up. We had snow. They had to cross the Euphrates to try and the river Euphrates to try and to escape capture. And this lad Steve was going down with hypothermia. So basically, he thought if he can get attract attention, he'd start doing a runner towards the border, and hopefully they'll get Steve and maybe save him. So he died at some stage after capture, because they certainly found him. So us two then eventually went to Baghdad, and again, because of the bombing, we had to stop and then try and get into Baghdad again, handcuffed, blindfolded, and we landed up in an interrogation center where there was another member of the patrol who'd already been taken there. So it was all held in separate cells, and basically it was quite well done, actually. It was quite sort of organised, because they'd been fighting these wars for 10 years with Iran. So you get beaten up in your cells. You got stripped, handcuffed, blindfolded all the time, then dragged to interrogations, where, you know, we've whipped, burnt with spoons over, you know, to all like cuts and grazes and all that sort of stuff. So because there was no electricity or running water in Baghdad, because it'd been bombed. First things you hit when you're doing an air campaign is get the utilities. So they would heat them over paraffin heaters, you know, and you know, sort of what you'd expect in these sort of interrogations.
Yeah.
And then I had some teeth pulled out that was smashed during the tactical questioning by a guy who said he was a dentist from Guy's Hospital in London for 9 years, and he's gone back for the war, because what we supported Iraq in their war against Iran. So it's really interesting. And some of the interrogators had actually been to Sandhurst, some of the military interrogators, because, you know, we had that officer exchange thing going on. So it's a really weird sort of situation, really.
Amazing stories. I mean, Andy, I could talk to you all day. I've done a few audience with you in the Northeast when you've had books to bring out. But sadly, the clock is about to beat us. So I've got to give a little bit of this show towards you know, the new program that's due to be released. And this is the first of many. I mean, you've not only are you a best-selling author with millions of copies of various books selling around the world in multiple languages, but you've also managed to you know, get a lot of these dramatized into film or to TV shows. And the latest one is this, SAS Red Notice, available next year, I think it is, on Sky. The official trailer is now available on YouTube, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's out on Sky now.
Oh, it's out on Sky now, so there we go.
So in this country, it's called SAS Red Notice. Worldwide, it's called SAS Rise of the Black Swan. And it's it's doing the rounds. It's doing all right, actually. It went straight in at number 2 in the United States. So really happy.
Can you give us any you know, well, any idea of what the story's about without giving too much of the plot line away?
No, not at all. But basically, it's based on a franchise of books. Is about a serving SAS guy called Tom Buckingham. So Tom is on the Eurostar going to Paris. He's going to propose to his girlfriend once they get to Paris. But actually, the Ruby Rose, who plays the leader of a private military company, well, her dad's the leader, but she's sort of taken over, plan to hijack the Channel Tunnel as a revenge, not to blow it up, nothing like that. Basically, it's because they were working for the Brit government covertly, and they've been stitched up. So they said, you know what, we get our own back. So you've got Sam Ewan, who plays Tom Buckingham, who's on the train. So he's the guy on the inside. You've got the head of the Special Air Service, played by Andy Serkis, and he's basically going down. All he wants to do is kill Grace, who's played by Ruby Rose, because she's got all the secrets. She knows where all the skeletons are. So it's this duality of trying to do it. And obviously, there's action both in London, in the tunnel, which was built in Hungary for total thing, 250 meters of track and trains and all that sort of stuff. And then we filmed in Paris for the French end, and then in the Canary Islands for the for the final. So it's been really well received, actually. As I say, straight in at number 2. We couldn't beat Wonder Woman. We tried, but it didn't.
Any new books in the pipeline?
Yeah, there's a new Nick Stone that's going to come out in next October, November. Obviously, it hasn't been anything during the lockdown. What I should have been was being really efficient and work and write during the lockdown, but I didn't. So I've now got to get my finger out to get it done. It'll be done by about June next year, and that'll come out in October. And if anybody's big fans of Bollywood films, in 2022, there's going to be. I wrote a short story called The Grey Man, and that's being turned into a film in Mumbai. So it's going to be a Bollywood film. Can't wait. It's going to be great fun.
Don't forget to give us a shout, Andy, man. I'm sitting here as an actor waiting for this role in one of your shows.
Oh, there you go.
Just get us a casting. The Bollywood one sounds good.
I know. Because hopefully we're going to get over it. I don't know how it's going to happen with COVID at the moment. But, it's like ever since I was a kid, obviously, where I used to live, loads of Bollywood coming in. Great fun. Can't wait.
I mean, you've had many exciting times in your life, some hair-raising ones as well. I guess one of the proudest moments must have been getting the CBE, was it, in 2017?
You know what? Yeah, it is quite interesting because it's one of those things that you get a letter and they say, "Oh, you've been awarded. Do you want it?" And you go, "Yeah, well, yeah, of course." You tick the box or whatever. But it's really nice actually, because what I've been doing, again, going back to that education when I was in junior leaders. What happened was then education just continually, just was continuous. Even when I got into the regiment, just realising how important it was. And so what I do now, I go into comprehensive schools in the state school system and prisons and the military as well during their basic training phases, and sort of tell the story about 16, 17-year-old with a reading age of a 7-year-old and what it can do for you. Reading sort of knowledge gives you power, and do it in prisons. The biggest occupational group in prison are the military. And it's not PTSD, strangely enough. What it is young lads who get out, and it's a mixture of violence and alcohol. That's what they're in for. And you're going, lads, while you're in, you're in. So just accept it, but use the system. Let's try and get some education, get out and give it a go. So it was for that sort of work, working in the schools and the prisons, what it's for, which was really, really nice. Because I still don't know who put us up for it, but it's great. It's amazing.
Tom Dixon sent a question in. He said, "What inspired you to write your books, and did anyone inspire you to make the films?"
To make the books?
What inspired you to do that? Was it just life experience?
I think first of all, it was I worked on Bravo 20 came about because I was given the offer to write a book alongside a general about it, and I thought, well, I don't want to do that. If I do it, I'll do it myself. And I was told to read Touching the Void, Joe Simpson's book, the climbing book. And they said, if you can get the sense of atmosphere in your work, which was quite dry, because it was almost like a patrol report, he says that would work. So I'd done that to, if you like, write Bravo 20. But then as far as I was concerned, that was it. But I got an offer, which again changed my life, to do with film, to go to Hollywood and work on an Al Pacino, Robert De Niro film called Heat. So I spent 7 months on that film, doing all the weapon work on it and the big shootout at the end and all that. And the director, a guy called Michael Mann, and he said, "Well, what are you going to do now? You're going to get into writing?" And I said, "Well, I don't really, I tell you the truth, writing fiction, again, not having that traditional sort of sense of reading as a kid and structure." He said, "Look, don't worry about it." He said, "All you do, you base it on a 3-act drama. Without us knowing it, we all know 3-act dramas. We've all been brought up on TV and film." He says, everybody knows it, whether they know it or not. So you have a prologue, set it up. You have 3 acts. You have an epilogue, short and sharp, before they get bored. And for me, that's the guy. And he said, "You can do it." He says, because we all know 3-act dramas. He says, you can do it. So think of it as scenes rather than paragraphs. And he said, think of the chapters as the commercial breaks. So at the end of every chapter, that's when the Daz advert comes on.
Yeah.
And that was it. So if you like, for an inspiration, it was that guy, Michael Mann, without a doubt.
Last question from one of the people who sent one in on Twitter. He says, what is all the beef between Andy and Chris Ryan?
Well, there isn't. Nobody's seen him for years. I think that initially I was quite sort of confused and angry about what was going on. But then I realized that it was just all part, the way that the media goes, it's you can't have tranquility, if you like, if that's the word. So, the media had a great day. So they revel everything up. But actually, nobody's, I haven't seen him for about 20 years, I don't think, anyway.
So there you go, Jim.
In some cases, sometimes it's quite nice if the media then did rattle up something up when a book come out, just to get a bit more publicity.
Well, that's it. Yeah, he's just done James English's podcast. So anybody watching this, give that a watch. He has just raised his head above the parapet and done an interview. And I've done a show with Chris as well. He's a nice guy from this neck of the woods. Last two questions are both from me. First and foremost, you've written a lot of fictional characters, Andy. Anyone can go through your back catalogue of books. Sean Harker, Liam Scott. Just trying to think of the other one. You've written the one you mentioned a little bit earlier as well.
Tom Buckingham.
Tom Buckingham, yeah. Which one's the closest? Which one's the closest to Andy McNab?
Nick Stone. Nick Stone. I think firstly because he was the first one, and again I thought it was going to be the only one, but actually what happened? The Tom Buckingham is a character the Americans wanted. And so they said, well, do a new franchise. And again, book business like any other business. They said, right, let's have a look and see what else. But I think, interestingly, Tom Buckingham initially was called Tom Mullin, because I thought that was quite sort of, hard and easy. And they went, oh, no, we won't know he's a Brit. So let's call him Tom Buckingham.
Buckingham Palace.
But it's really Nick Stone because it's in first person narrative. So, anybody who writes in first person narrative, you've always got to use your own sort of thought process, because what you're trying to do is trying the reader to feel that you're talking to them, I don't know, over a pint, over a cup of coffee, a more personal engagement. So the only way first person narrative you can do that is by using your own thought processes and your own, like, your own, your own syntax and all the stuff that makes you who you are, trying to get it down on the page. So the only problem with first person narrative, though, is that all the problems have got to come to him. Yeah. And then they've got to hit him, and then he's got to try and work it out. So if you do third person narratives like Tom Buckingham, like a TV show, you can go off. You can go off and see the bad guy on the other side of the planet. You can set things up. But first person, it all has to come to you. So it for me is the favourite character because it's first person narrative.
Yeah, fair enough. Those people sitting at home watching this will be probably at the start. We're trying to adjust their TV sets or their computers, thinking, "Is there something wrong because we can't?"
Yeah, they'll blame you for this, won't they?
They'll be blaming me, but I can say that obviously the promotional flyer shows you exactly why. We've got this picture problem because Andy protects his identity. Andy, last question: why do you do this?
Oh, I've lost you.
Did you get us the question, Andy? Can you still hear us?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, mate. The question was, why do you protect your identity like that?
Yeah. It's very simple. Basically, after I'd done the troop tour, I then went on to work for an organisation called Thought and Intelligence, which it has different names: the Intelligence and Security Group, the DET. Basically, it's an undercover organisation working in Northern Ireland that's trying to identify active service units of the Provisional IRA, Irish, National Liberation Army, those sort of things. And I didn't volunteer to go. I was asked if I wanted to go, me and this other fella. and they're asking you, but you're going whether you like it or not. Initially, I didn't want to go because I thought, well, I would have gone to 14 in as opposed to gone to the regiment if I wanted to do that work. But actually, so I spent 2 years in Derry as an undercover operator. So I do a lot of work, used to do a lot of work with the special branch undercover operators that are there, who are local lads. So 2 years in Derry, and again, it's the long hair, living out, and all that sort of stuff. Big sort of haircuts. And what happens if I identify my face, like things like this and chatting away, all that is not a problem. Exposing the face is a problem because the special branch guys still live there. So the connections that working with them, those undercover operators, it potentially puts them and the families at risk. And it was about 5 years ago, I went to Belfast to do stuff with the police service there. And you get death threats. So there's the fruits out there, there's all that sort of stuff. But sometimes you get credible threats. So the last one was about 5 years' time when I was in Belfast with the police there. So it's just being sensible, basically. Not hiding in sort of dark hallways and all that sort of stuff. It's just being sensible.
Yeah, makes sense. Andy, thank you so much for giving up your time, mate.
Pleasure.
And best of luck with this. I'm going to make sure that I get a good watch of that over the Christmas period. Good luck with the book. Yeah, it has, mate. Good luck with the books. Good luck with the Bollywood film. And I look forward to seeing you next time you're passing through Newcastle to promote a book. Brilliant. Take care, mate.
Thanks a lot.
Great to have Andy on, and big shout out to our sponsors, as always, Spider VPN. For all your internet security, Google Spider VPN. They are the boys to trust. Skipsandbins.com, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy, contract free, and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Also, thank you to L&G Family Funeral Directors, 01913897245, and at the Garden of Healing Dispensary. You can find them at www.thegohd.com. Thanks also to Arcot Interiors, based on Heaton Road in Newcastle, and qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who run our website. Thanks also to Jab Signature, jabsignature.co.uk, and you can also subscribe to the channel. Just log on to the Newcastle Legends logo in the bottom right-hand corner, and that's it. You can subscribe for free. We do 7 shows a week on Newcastle United, and we do a one-off show each week where we speak to somebody from a different type of environment, world, or job. And that was a great one today. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes and Spotify and other podcast providers. So get yourself onto there if you're out walking the dog or in the car. I've been Steve Wraith. This has been the True Crime Interview. Thank you for watching.